Good morning, everyone. In case you didn't hear, I tore my Achilles yesterday, and at the time of you viewing this, will probably be under anesthesia and surgery. But I still wanted to show you what I'm working on, so here's my presentation. What I've been working on this semester is kind of looking at the relationship between city planning and social media, and seeing whether or not they're friends or enemies, as you can see by this slide. So first, just to give you some context. Right now, as you all know, this is kind of some basic stuff. City planning and the public have a tenuous relationship. The best thing you can do to have your voice heard is go to a planning meeting. You have your 2-3 minutes on the agenda, and then the next person goes. So really not much opportunity, with exceptions, to get your voice heard in the planning world. Additionally, large developers are really dominating the market. It's hard to get your input in on these huge projects if they're building a 200 unit development, and want to keep your house, or you want just to have your input on the project. It's hard to make that happen. Smaller projects, you do have a little bit more opportunity, but even so, not very much opportunity to make your voice heard. Additionally, city planning right now in the public eye lacks the luster of flashy urban design projects. So you can't create a really nice visual schematic of a plan. Instead, you'll have a comprehensive growth plan with zoning diagrams and everything like that. So to your everyday person, it's not very attractive and it's not very eye-catching. Unlike architecture's schematics that are 3D designs of the projects with really nice graphics. And then also, the public's knowledge of a project is often dependent on the developer's outreach, which is usually pretty non-existent. The developer usually, in some of the projects I was looking at, does not really try that hard to make it known what's going on with the project. And as you'll see in a second, that goes all the way up into the federal level. So here's an example. The Van Buren interchange roundabout plans, I don't know if you guys have heard about them, but they're thinking about putting in roundabouts on the on-off ramps of I-90 at Van Buren. And thanks to little or no outreach, they received only 20 responses. They sent out this questionnaire and they received only 20 responses. So I think part of the reason there is, mail-in questionnaires have historically never really been answered. But additionally, it just shows that they didn't really go to great lengths to advertise this, because I think a lot of people up in the Rattlesnake would have been pretty passionate about this project. It really would change the character of their neighborhood. Additionally, as you guys well know, this is a page from the Missoula County Growth Policy, just to kind of bolster what I was saying about the lack of pizzazz in planning documents. If you were just an everyday citizen trying to get involved in a planning project and you stumbled upon something like this to get your data, compared to a nice infographic or just a clean poster, it would be pretty difficult to gather enough data to make your voice heard. So clearly planning is in some need of a catalyst or a boost, and this is exactly where I think social media can come into play. Planning is so regimented and bureaucratic, so much red tape, whereas social media is the exact opposite. It's flexible, it's real-time, dynamic, and it's flashy and captivating. So the question arises, can city planning and social media effectively combine? So before we answer that question, let's go into some context about social media. Currently, social media, opinions vary, but it's been around. Its roots started in the late 90s, and it started evolving. MySpace entered the scene around 2003, and then Facebook shortly after there. So because of that, when I was trying to find sources for this research, it was pretty hard. There's a ton of information on blogs and on personal websites just about people's opinions about social media, and they create a history of social media, but it's hard to verify if that's true. And on the other hand, the academic literature is infrequent and very, very specific analysis of certain projects. So I didn't have too much to go off of, but at the beginning of my project, one of my mentors I was talking about how I was worried about using the web sources, and she said, "Well, you should. That's the nature of social media. It's not always completely verified or peer reviewed like academic literature, but that's an important aspect of your report." So I went ahead and used some of those sources, but I made sure to check out the people behind them and their portfolios to make sure they seemed legitimate. And then once I got some of these sources, I found several precedents all over the globe of cities and people doing using social media effectively in their planning projects. And these were the most important aspects of my report, just because they showed actual success stories of social media. And so to analyze this issue, I found some of these key projects and analyzed them, like I said, by asking questions like, would this project be possible without social media? How did the social aspect affect the project? And then what happened in the end? So basically, I just set up a before-after comparison to judge how effective each project really was. So before we ask this question, let's look at these key examples to find out. Austin, Texas has a project called Snap ATX, Social Networking and Planning Project, which essentially sets up a Twitter-like platform for its residents, and they can say anything like, the train is delayed, there's a pothole on my street, there's a big accident on this highway, and that gets uploaded onto this app, and anyone else using it can see that, just like a Twitter feed. But it's very specific to Austin, and it's very specific to city infrastructure issues. And as you can see, this is the analysis sheet from Snap as they were presenting for it. And already this is so much more attractive than that planning document I saw before. But this does still have real data in it. And so this really gives residents a voice. It allows anyone to voice a concern about their city through a fun and kind of engaging forum. And so after the fact, once the user tweets about something, quote unquote, the planners can look at all of this data and say, okay, there seems to be a lot of accidents at this corner, or these trains keep getting delayed because of some issue on the tracks. So it's really a really valuable resource for planners, because they can see what their citizens are saying is wrong with their city, rather than waiting for the citizens to approach them when there's 200 people at a meeting trying to make their voice heard. And so basically they're just trying to allow their citizens to express their opinions in a fun, educational way, and then use those opinions in a tactical manner for transportation, mobility, and rail in Austin. Another example is across the globe in Australia. It's Melbourne, Australia's Future Melbourne project. And for those of you who don't know, this is based on a wiki, just like Wikipedia. It's a universally editable document that's posted online. So it's a universally editable comprehensive growth plan. It started in 2008 to replace their City Growth 2010 plan that was already in existence, and it stretches all the way to 2020. So it allowed anyone to change the document by doing these four things: reading it at first, editing it, which was kind of a peer-reviewed process. They could propose edits, and then in the discussion tab they could back up why they thought this was a good idea, and people would either say, yeah, you're right, or maybe you should change it to this. And then discussing these changes face-to-face, and they would schedule face-to-face meetings, and also in online forums, and then creating future scenarios that were hypothetical but still just served to keep looking forward. So let's check it out. Maybe. If you have internet, this will work. Otherwise, it won't. Oh, I guess it still will. So here's their page. It's nice looking. It's pretty well organized. But I just wanted to show you guys this. So not only is this a growth plan from a planning aspect, but they've incorporated it into every aspect of their city. So it's in the city council plan, it's in their business plan, it's in their annual budget, and in the individual performance plan. And it overlays all of these things. So this might just seem like, oh, we're going to try and make everyone make this document, but they really actually used everyone's feedback in this project. And so after a while, they closed all the editing and the planners formatted it, which is kind of a people were worried that that would become, planners would just disregard what everyone said, but that didn't happen. And then they actually formalized it and signed it and put it into action, and it will go until 2020, and then they'll have to renew it then. So the third project is called Livehoods, and they call it a new way to understand a city using social media. So this isn't necessarily a planning specific project, but it adds a lot to the field. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the app, there's an app called Foursquare, which essentially every time you go to a certain location, you can access this app on your smartphone and check in, quote unquote. And this will just tell your peers, everyone in your social network, that say you are at Big Dipper Ice Cream. And then if you go there a lot, you get points and you can become mayor and stuff. It's basically just a fun way to tell people what you've been up to. And so the Livehoods is based on those check-ins. And what it does is it spatializes an urban dweller's everyday life. So at the beginning of the project, they took a couple thousand people and mapped their movement throughout the day based on their smartphones. And what they found was that the traditional neighborhood boundaries that they expected, demographic boundaries, so say the University District versus the North Side or versus the slant streets, didn't really apply anymore. People were going into different neighborhoods to shop, to go to different restaurants, to go to a movie, and not really regarding those socioeconomic boundaries as was the previous perception. And so not only is that useful just to see the flow of people, but planners can use it in a really amazing way, which I will talk to you in a second about. So here is the San Francisco Live Hood. Maybe. Okay. So each one of these dots represents a check-in location. So let's just drill down a little. We can click on this random one. This is Live Hood number 41. So in this white area, all these white dots, these are the top 5 most popular places that people checked in at. And then these are the most popular things to do in this neighborhood. So just on a surface level, if you're visiting San Francisco, you could say, oh, like I want to go find some recreation. What can I do over here? It's on the beach. And you'll see here, beach, park, art museum. So just from a tourist aspect, this is very useful. But additionally, from a planning aspect, this provides business data far sooner than planners could get from an annual business report or anything. If a new district springs up or a new really popular restaurant or farmer's market, it'll show up on here. And planners can use that and say, oh, well, we're pretty lacking here in pedestrian safety infrastructure. Let's install lighted crossings, or let's install bulb outs, or let's run a new bus line out there. And I know that's all hypothetical, but I think it's pretty useful. So again, not only is it useful just for the people of the city, but also planners can use this data after the fact, and by seeing where people are going and what new things are popping up, they can create new plans based on that. And additionally, businesses can use this and say, oh, we should start advertising, for our new beachside grill in this neighborhood. So it's a pretty cool tool. So these are all pretty cool, flashy ideas, but the problem is they all forget about the long term. As you well know, long-term planning is a pretty important aspect of the whole discipline, and without it, our cities would fall apart in whatever, 10, 20 years. So all these tools, the farthest they reach is Future Melbourne. It goes to 2020. The other two tools are, in the moment, instantaneous data. And Mayor Michael Bloomberg expressed just this. He basically just said, his words were, we're holding a general election every day on our everyday lives. So everything is up to review, but we're forgetting about the long-term future, which in our cities, if we forget about that, they'll fall apart. And I think the reason for this is long-term planning, again, gets back to that comprehensive growth plan issue. It's not as shiny, it's less tangible, it's less understandable by the public, so people tend to shy away from it. Another issue with these tools is the data can be suspect. Obviously, the LiveHoods app and Snap ATX are only available to those with smartphones and at the very least with internet access. So anyone outside of that box is excluded from the project, and there's probably a pretty big misrepresentation there. Um, because the majority of users of these things are of the younger generation, um, LiveHoods excludes a lot of those people, so it might be missing, a lot of restaurants that aren't as hip or that aren't as new. Um, so in the end, um, I do think that this is just the beginning. Sites are popping up, every month that are using the same model. There's something called FixMyStreet.com. That's a similar thing. You can go on the site and say, I call these complaint portals. You can say, oh, there's a tree that's fallen down in my street, or there's a big pothole. There's Wayfinder Mobile, which is pretty wild. You can hold your phone up and take a picture, and it'll tell you which way to go and what's around you. And then there's this Russian site, Street Journal, which is another complaint site. So these are all exciting trends, but like I said before, we have to be careful and take everything with a grain of salt. We still have to consider the long-term aspect, and we still can't forget about that. And hopefully some aspects of social media will be put towards analyzing that long-term. Future Melbourne does a tiny bit, but we need to extend that into the 30 to 50-year range, I think. And finally, as we've seen in the Arab Spring, as we've seen across the world, the individual's voice is becoming stronger worldwide thanks to, in part, social media. And I would think that trend is only going to continue. So social media and city planning do, in fact, combine well, but it's not perfect. We still need to polish it up a little bit. And we still haven't quite figured out how to best use the technology. It's still kind of in its infancy, and I think the next 10 to 20 years are going to be a pretty exciting trend for planning. That's all. It's been a great semester, and I will see you guys this summer, hopefully. Thanks.